welcome to the deep dive. Today we're cracking open a source that really makes you think differently about, well, language itself.
Yeah, we're diving into Luis Carlos Travaglia's book, Grammar and Interaction, specifically the ideas in it.
Exactly. It lays out these fundamental ways of understanding what language is.
Right. And our mission today is to unpack three of those distinct conceptions he talks about.
Explore why thinking about these differences actually matters. It's not just academic theory.
Not at all. It profoundly shapes how we approach language, how we might teach it, even how we figure out misunderstandings.
Because how you define language sort of sets the stage for everything else, right? It's the base assumption.
Absolutely. If you see language as, say, primarily just expressing thought, you'll approach grammar or even learning a new language very differently than if you see it as perhaps a tool for interaction.
Travaglia really helps us see those different lenses clearly.
He does.
Okay, so let's get into the first one. The source presents a view that's probably quite familiar to many people.
Yes, the first conception is language viewed primarily as an expression of thought.
Okay, so the idea here is you have a thought fully formed inside your head.
Like a picture or a concept.
And language is just the tool you grab to, show that picture to someone else, to get it out there.
That's the core idea. The source mentions that enunciation, the act of speaking or writing, is seen as fundamentally monological.
Monological mean like one person talking to themselves, almost.
Well, focused inward, yeah. Originating from the individual's own psychology, their internal logic. It's driven from the inside out.
So the thought exists first, perfectly, and language just tries to represent it.
A good way to put it. And this view has clear implications for grammar. Traditional grammar, in this perspective, is all about structure.
Structuring the language correctly.
Right, structuring it so it accurately and effectively reflects that pre-existing internal thought. The whole goal is clarity, achieving what people often call writing well or speaking clearly.
So if you think this way, maybe a grammatical mistake isn't just a mistake in language, but a failure to represent your thought properly.
That could be one interpretation, yes. The focus is very much on the individual speaker or writer successfully encoding their internal state.
So if you, listening, primarily think of language this way as getting your thoughts out, how does that shape maybe your expectations in a conversation?
Well, it puts a lot of pressure on the speaker's clarity and correctness. Success is measured by how well the output matches the internal thought. It's less about the listener's interpretation or the social situation.
Got it. Very internal, very speaker-focused. Okay, but obviously language usually involves, well, more than one person.
Right.
So the source moves on. What's the second conception?
The second view takes a step outward. It sees language as an instrument of communication, but specifically often framed as a code.
Okay, code. So now we're talking transmission.
Yeah.
Sender, receiver, message, that kind of model.
Exactly that classic model. But the key emphasis here is on the code itself. Language is seen as a system.
A system of dot.
Signs, symbols.
Signals, yeah. Sounds, letters, whatever. These signals represent information. And communication is basically encoding a message, using the shared code, sending it, and then the receiver decodes it. So it's social. Involves two people at least.
Definitely social, yes.
Yeah.
But the main focus isn't so much the social dynamics, it's the linguistic system, the code that makes it possible.
Okay. And this connects to certain linguistic theories, doesn't it? Like structuralism.
Yes, the source links it to structuralism and also generativism, like some of Chomsky's work. These approaches really dig into the internal workings of the language system itself.
They look at the rules, the structure. Almost like language is this object you can study separate from how people actually use it day to day.
Kind of, yeah. Focusing on the abstract system, its syntax, its components.
So if language is a code we use to send messages, how does this view explain when communication works? Or maybe more interestingly, when it breaks down?
Well, this model gives a pretty clear framework for that. Success happens when the sender and receiver use the same code effectively.
Encoding and decoding matchup.
Right. And miscommunication. That's often seen as a problem with the code transmission or application.
Like noise on the line.
Yeah.
Or using the wrong symbols.
Exactly. Or maybe the sender didn't encode clearly, or the receiver didn't have the right key to decode. Think about using, say, technical jargon with someone who doesn't know it. That's a code mismatch.
Okay, that makes sense. So instead of blaming fuzzy thinking like in the first view, you might blame a problem with the shared code or how it was used. It's more about the system between people.
Precisely. It shifts the focus from the individual mind to the system connecting individuals.
All right, so first view, expressing internal thought. Second view, transmitting messages using a shared code. The Force then presents a third view, which feels, well, broader, more complex.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
This third conception sees language fundamentally as a process of interaction.
Interaction. Okay, so this is where language isn't just describing stuff or sending data
Yes.
packets. It's about doing things,
Yeah.
affecting the person you're talking to.
Absolutely. That's the core. Language, in this view, is the place where human interaction happens. It's where we produce effects on each other.
And it's not happening in a vacuum, right? The source mentions context.
Crucially, it happens within a specific socio-historical ideological context. We're not just neutral speakers. We occupy social roles, we have histories, we speak from certain positions, influenced by society's ideas and instructions.
So who you are, who you're talking to, where you are, when you are,
Yeah.
it all shapes the language and what it does.
It's all intertwined. The source actually states that the fundamental reality here isn't just the abstract grammar rules or the sounds.
Or even the thought inside someone's head.
Right. The fundamental reality is the verbal interaction itself. The specific things people say or write, the enunciations happening in that rich context. Language is action in context.
Wow. Okay, that feels much more like, well, real life.
It resonates with a lot of modern linguistic study.
Yeah, the source lists fields like discourse analysis, pragmatics. What do these areas look at? How do they connect to this interaction view?
Well, they all operate with this underlying assumption. Discourse analysis looks at language in actual social situations. Conversation analysis breaks down the mechanics of talk. Pragmatics studies how meaning is made in context, how we understand intentions, implications, what's not explicitly said.
So things like politeness or persuasion or even irony.
Exactly. Things that depend heavily on the situation and the relationship between speakers. Semantics, argumentative, textual linguistics, they all fit under this broad umbrella of language as social action.
Okay, so if you adopt this interaction view, how does that change how you'd look at, say, an argument you overhear, or even just reading an email? It's different from just checking the grammar, right?
Totally different. You're looking beyond just, is this sentence correct, or what information is being sent?
You're asking.
You're asking, what is this language doing right now? Is it trying to build a connection, assert power, negotiate something? You consider the speaker's roles, the history, the potential impact on the listener.
Intended or unintended impact?
Both. It's a much deeper analysis. It's not just decoding, it's interpreting action and influence within a whole social web.
Right. Okay, let me try and quickly pull these threads together from Travaglia. We've got conception 1, language mainly serving the individual mind, getting thoughts out.
Internal focus.
Then conception 2, language as more of an external system, a code for transmitting messages between people.
System focus.
And finally, conception 3, language is the very fabric of social interaction, a dynamic process of people acting on each other within specific contexts.
Interactional and contextual focus. Yeah, that's a good summary of the progression the source outlines.
And it really highlights how our understanding, or at least our theoretical models, have shifted from inside the head to the system between heads to the whole social dance.
Exactly. And as Travaglia stresses, these aren't just abstract ideas. Which view you lean towards, even subconsciously, has huge consequences.
Especially for teaching, right? Teaching grammar.
Massively. Are you teaching grammar rules so someone can structure their thoughts clearly on paper? That's conception 1 leaning.
Or are you teaching the rules of the standard code so they can communicate effectively within that system?
That leans towards conception 2. Or are you teaching language structures as resources people can use to achieve different goals in different social situations?
That's conception 3, helping people understand how to use language to do things effectively and appropriately in the world.
Precisely. The goal of the teaching changes dramatically based on your fundamental idea of what language is.
It really reframes the whole purpose of grammar instruction, doesn't it?
It absolutely can. It's a powerful lens.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you listening to sort of chew on. We've talked about these 3 ways of seeing language: expression, code, interaction.
Yeah.
How does actively thinking about which view you might be using at any given moment change things? Like when you hit a misunderstanding with someone, does seeing it as a code mismatch versus a failure of interaction versus unclear thinking give you different ways to resolve it?
Good question.
Or when you're analyzing an argument, maybe in the news or something, does thinking about the interactional goals, what the speaker is doing with their words, change your interpretation compared to just evaluating the logic?
Or even learning a new language. Are you focused on mastering the code, expressing your inner self, or learning how to interact appropriately in a new culture?
Yeah. thinking about which conception or maybe combination of conceptions is at play. How does that shift your perspective on language in your own life?
It's worth considering. It might just make you see those everyday language encounters in a completely new light.